G'day mates, this is Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and that intro was an homage to ZiggyD, one of my favorite YouTubers of all time. 3.5 years ago, he posted a Poison Scion Sparker that he proclaimed as the best build he had ever played. My goal is to recreate that build as faithfully as I can, making some adjustments for mechanics and items that have changed since then, and see how it holds up in the current meta. Welcome to episode 2 of Old School POE. The first major change I had to address was the change to pierce. It now has a finite number of times a single projectile can pierce. I got around this by adding as many additional pierces as I could using the Deadeye Scion Ascendancy, piercing shots on the skill tree, and of course the pierce gem. The second major change I had to make was to drop Drill Neck. It no longer provides power to non-attack projectiles as it used to, and I've instead changed it to Seamus's Gift, which is a quiver that could still provide me with a pretty hefty amount of damage and cast speed, with 1% lightning damage per 10 intelligence, which is a total of 25% lightning damage on my current setup. Lastly, Life Leech has been changed significantly. We can no longer use the Berserker Ascendancy to grant us Leech for our Spark, as it only works on attacks now. So we're instead using Elementalist as our second choice for our Ascendant. This means we can no longer use Warlord's Mark on Hit for our Curse on Hit setup to gain Leech. We'll instead be using Projectile Weakness. I got the Lab Enchant for Leech on my boots and also use Etziri's Promise to get some of that Leech back in. The core items of this build are Voltaxic Rift, which has been nerfed. It used to convert 100% of lightning damage into chaos. Now, unfortunately, it only converts 60%. We're also using Winds of Change for projectile speed and projectile damage, and some nice knockback, and Victario's Acuity. Although, if you want, you can actually take the Trickster over the Elementalist in the Scion Ascendancy to generate charges, and then use whichever amulet you really want. Outside of that, I'm going for high evasion gear with life and resists. I'm currently rocking an Etziri's Splendor for my body armor, but that's only because it was the only 6-link that I had that I could easily get the right colors for the build on. The main skill we use is Vol Spark with Spell Echo, Pierce, Poison, Innervate, and faster projectiles. We're also rocking an old school cast when damage taken Immortal Call setup with increased duration and summon Flame Golem. Then we're using Herald of Thunder with Curse on Hit Projectile Weakness, Clarity, and Herald of Ice. Herald of Ice can easily be replaced with Arctic Armor to make it more faithful, but I find myself wanting to avoid face tanking if I can with the current higher damage in the endgame. I'm also, like the original, using Vol Haste and Vol Grace. I had to do a little bit of restructuring for the skill tree to make sure that we could get piercing shots. As a result, we no longer go through the underside of the ranger as the original did, and instead we're going to beeline up to the shadow. The most important notes on the skill tree are Elemental Equilibrium, the duration nodes near the Scion start, Acrobatics and Phase Acrobatics, Piercing Shots, and the Poison Wheel near it, and of course Projectile Speed to keep the sparks bouncing. Then we simply pick up a ton of life, projectile damage, and elemental damage. Alright, let's get into some action here. So back in the day, Etziri Viable was one of the main considerations for whether or not your build was good, and so I decided to take this old school build into an Etziri run. Just a regular Etziri. I didn't think it could do Uber Etziri, and based on some of my previous things, but as you can see, the first mini-bosses actually both started shooting minions, and this build kills them before they land, so I didn't even have to move. The second mini-boss was a little bit more difficult. We went ahead and had to kite them around a little bit. It's hard to deterministically kill them in the right order, and when you're killing them this slowly, it is usually nice to do that. But luckily, despite our relatively low damage with this build, we are able to actually take these guys down. It just took a little bit of nuance and a little bit of extra oomph. But, well, we decided to finally get to Ziri, or rather we went to Ziri, and I doubled the speed of this just because of all the phases. I also want to point out, you may have noticed in the footage, I actually don't keep my Vol Haste and Vol Grace up at all times, and the reasoning for that is that you can no longer recover souls while the skill is actually being used. Unless you, of course, have a unique flask that currently costs 15 exalts, and I wasn't going to spend that and couldn't expend that on this build. So I went ahead and decided, okay, I'll just use them mostly for bosses or for very difficult encounters. Vol Spark I use a lot more liberally, though. Basically whenever it's up, but the Ziri fight itself was actually easier overall than the second mini-boss. Once you're accustomed to the Ziri fight, you usually don't get hit very often, so it's not that big of a deal. I think maybe I get hit once this entire fight, maybe not even, especially with the spell dodge. And finally, I decided to take it into a Guardian map, a Shaper Guardian map, specifically Pit of the Chimera, because I thought that the relatively closed nature of the map would actually be really nice. I was a little nervous about going up against the boss, and I actually didn't think I would be able to do it at all, and we'll see if I'm right on that, but I already know. This commentary is in post, but we're going to go ahead and go through here. So I actually rolled I did Fortune Favors the Brave and paid 3 Chaos, and I actually got some Exiles. So I end up fighting against 2 Exiles here, and despite the ease at which I cleared the trash, I do end up getting surprise killed by the Exiles. So come back to get my revenge. Now that I know it's here, I kind of try to fight it around the corner. That's one of the benefits of this build, is you can kind of off-screen things with all the projectile speed. So I managed to get a little bit of extra damage, and then I just finally go and face it and manage to take down the Exile here, which was quite nice. And then I went ahead and moved on through the map, and yeah, the blue packs go down nicely. All the trash mobs do. Some of the yellows can take a little bit extra here, but decided to try out a Blight. Now, I didn't have any trouble doing Blights with this on yellow maps, and also keep in mind that this build is actually only level 84. So honestly, if I just leveled in yellow maps to level 90, I could probably have over 5,000 health pretty easily, especially considering a majority of the nodes I plan on getting on this build are going to be the life nodes. So I have at least 4 life nodes I plan on getting immediately if I continue this build as is, although I'm actually thinking currently I may reformat this build to drop the poison, drop the Voltaxic Rift. I actually like the Spark setup, so I'm probably going to repurpose this into a regular Spark build, and if that's something you'd like to see, let me know in the comment section below. I might do a video on that, video update, before the next league, of course. So yeah, I'll probably just put a more generically strong wand or scepter or something, but yeah, we just don't do enough damage to do the Blight here, unfortunately, not even close. Even if it was maybe in a more enclosed space on the map, we might have had a chance, but it just happened to spawn in one of the wider areas of the map, so no go on that. But we are proceeding to clear the trash. Look at me picking up all of this. I started running out of lower tier loot, and I don't really want to convert my exalts just to buy, you know, whetstones and all that kind of stuff. So I end up picking up a lot of this, but not too much, hopefully, and hopefully that isn't too obnoxious for you. I know a lot of people are like, why are you picking up that trash loot? And sometimes I just have to, man. I run out. So I am going to get to the boss here, but first we run into another set of rogue exiles here. The double rogue exiles actually are tanky enough in the tier 16 map that they give us a lot of trouble, and we of course are able to defeat them, but without dying this time, which is important. Death is something you generally want to avoid, more or less. But we got some nice sulfite on here. I think I actually did a sulfite scarab. I wanted to max out on my delves here. Run into another exile not too long afterwards, managed to take him down. We could easily off-screen that one. He does have a leap slam, but we do manage to take him down. A lot of stuff we can actually face tank. We have enough dodge and evasion. We can face tank a decent amount of things, especially with our leech. And but some of these exiles seem to hit very frequently despite our dodge and evasion, and we're dying again. So the double exile gets us again. We ended up taking it down with poison after we died, so if we could have survived just 1 second longer. So we're already a couple of portals down going into the boss, and I'm like, if I'm having trouble with rogue exiles, I can't imagine how much more difficult that the actual Chimera himself will be. But we're almost to the Chimera here, and we're taking down the yellows pretty happily, getting some good map sustain, lots of red maps, and even Maze of the Minotaur dropped earlier. And yeah, here is the boss fight itself. And as you can see, the arena is actually fairly large. In order to get the maximum amount of poisons we can get in the 2.6 seconds to match our DPS, we need to hit with at least, in order to double our DPS with poison, we basically need to hit with 12 or 13 sparks in 2.66 seconds, which is very difficult to do in this kind of arena. So I die the first time, and this death was really dumb. It was super easily avoidable. I'm usually pretty good at, flame dashing out of that, but I think I was kind of tilted from all the deaths on the map, and they just kind of snowball. So we end up with a decent amount of deaths here. We're going in with our final portal, as you can see, and this time I try to kite around a lot more. I need to make sure that I'm not flame dashing too much, because I need to keep one to get out of his red circle of death. We just stay at the edge of it right there, and as you can see, unfortunately, we weren't quite able to make it. So really good build overall, but not quite endgame viable. Still stands up. I hope you enjoyed. This has been Ryan from Behind Eyes Gaming, and I will see you next time. Bye!